Another day here. It is Monday the 10th of November, 2025, and that means it's another video from me about things. And in this particular episode, I'll talk to you about Trump and the deal he was trying to force Israel to accept to release some 200 or so, anywhere from 100 to 200. The estimates are around 200 for the most part. Could be 50. I mean, it could be 150. It could be 200. We'll see. But there are some 200 or so Hamas terrorists trapped in tunnels in Gaza on the Israeli side of the line of control. And they are basically refusing to surrender. And their leaders have told them not to surrender. And that means that they should have every expectation not to walk out of there because they are surrounded by armed and capable IDF soldiers. But their political leaders, the last time apparently that they had contact, which was apparently a while ago, the last time they had contact, their leaders told them not to surrender under any circumstances. But, they may or may not be even aware that there was a ceasefire, but that is actually not the case because we know from other incoming information that they are in fact aware of it and that they recently regained lines of communications somehow with the people that rule them. So probably they found some kind of a power device to charge up their phones and figured out a way to get a line, or maybe not phones, but maybe some kind of other communications devices that they're using. And what it means is basically that they do not want to surrender because they still haven't. Now, the reason that they were initially offered the potential of being freed is because it was believed that they had the body, or they had discovered the body of Hadar Golden, who is, of course, an IDF soldier who fell in battle back in 2014 and whose body was then taken. He was killed in Gaza, and his body was taken to a secure place, Hamas secured place, and they apparently buried him somewhere, I guess in the field or something, and decided to hold on to him all these years without returning him. And as a result, Hadar Golden's name has become synonymous with all of the horrible things that Hamas does, and it reinforces sort of the reason that Israel is so persistent when pursuing the retrieval of all remains of all of its fallen soldiers and hostages that are held by anyone, especially a group like Hamas, that is, frankly, a group that behaves very savagely towards the living and the dead, and does acts of almost unspeakable cruelty. When I say almost, I mean it is really unspeakable in polite company, but when you're covering these stories, you kind of have to deal with the details sometimes. And it's very, very evident that Hamas does not respect the living or the dead. What they did with the body of Mr. Tsarfati, another soldier who died in battle and whose body was returned not once, or his remains rather were returned not once, not twice, but now 3 times. They said they've given back all the remains. I guess only time will tell if that's in fact true. For now, all we know is that the remains of Mr. Tsarfati were, for a 3rd time, partially returned. Hopefully that's all of the remains. And his body had to be dug up twice after internment in Israel. So his family has had to go through all of that 3 times, basically, just the burial part. Burial, dig up, bury again, dig up, bury again. It's absolutely awful, and it is absolutely psychological and emotional torture onto the family of the soldier. Uh, and that is just disgusting the way they do that. But that's who we're dealing with here in Israel. Unfortunately, we're not dealing with the kindest people on the planet when it comes to Hamas. If we were, we wouldn't be in a war with them in the first place. And they don't really exactly have a moral compass when it comes to how to treat people properly. They very much do some very disgusting things, to be honest. So that is right now what's happening is Trump is pressuring Israel to give up or to let go the 200 hostages that are armed and trapped in the tunnels, which Israel could easily eliminate at this point by just dropping a couple of bombs on where they are and let it be over. There's really no reason for Israel not to do that. Maybe they're just going to play it out and wait and see how long these guys can go hungry for. Honestly, I think they should just, you got 200 enemy combatants who refuse to surrender. Yeah, it sucks to be them. Well, they chose poorly. They chose to fight for Hamas against Israel. If they don't want to surrender when they've been trapped, that's what happens. It's not like Israel would kill them if they actually surrendered. So there's no reason for them not to surrender. The only reason they don't is because of basically this nationalist view that they have of themselves. Right? They consider themselves to be nationalists, or not even nationalists, jihadists, who just want to, bring their version of jihad to the world. And that means that they don't really have an interest at a human level of, well, staying alive. Right? They just want to be shaheeds. Well, Israel should let them be shaheeds then. Because honestly, what else are you going to get out of them? You're going to somehow get them to what? What are they going to do? They're going to sing the Israeli national anthem on TV and with pride and joy in their hearts, sing you the praises of, some Zionist, pro-Zionist Israeli organization. No, they're going to continue to hate in their hearts. They're going to continue to do everything they can to undermine, Israel and destroy Israel, kill as many people in Israel as possible, kill Israeli soldiers in Gaza, as many as possible. That's what they want to do. So there is literally no reason. I understand humanity, compassion. Really? These guys aren't exactly humane or compassionate. And the things they would do to somebody if they would catch them, well, we know what they would do. We have plenty of evidence of it. And it's not good. And people like that, sorry, but they've lost their rights to be. Right? They are combatants in a war. And yeah, they're on the losing side. And yeah, that means they're going to have to pay a bigger price than the Israelis have to in terms of kinetic damage. That's the side that they've chosen to fight for. Very few people, if any, are being forced to be Hamas fighters, right? These are things that they want to do because they are promised a better life and all this stuff. Sure, there's some people who are kind of, pressured into it by either family or friends or maybe Hamas themselves if they want somebody in particular to do something. Yeah, you can make that argument here and there. Maybe that happens. But overall, they're not getting 20,000 people into their ranks by pressuring every one of them to join their great and glorious organization, right, of disgusting terrorists. Right, because if every single one of them was pressured in that way, it would be fairly easy for them to, if they didn't want to be in that organization, for them to use their weapons and turn them against the leaders if they were all against the leaders. But they're obviously not all against the leaders. Most of them support the leaders of their organization, if not all, right? Probably all. Let's be honest. You know, you're not going to stay in an organization like that if you vehemently disagree with it, right? They will out you. They will probably annihilate you, because that's what they do with people who leave their organization if they can catch them. And yeah, it's just very telling. Listen, if you're in those tunnels now and you're not an IDF soldier, well, you're not a living Israeli hostage either, as far as we know. And there's only like 4 dead bodies left in Gaza at this point, dead hostages left in Gaza. So what should be the case? Well, the case should be that Israel should end this charade, because that's what this is turning into and has been from day one of this so-called ceasefire. Hello there, Justin, Tony, I don't know, Ines Schomburg. I don't know what that means. Blue collar? What does blue collar mean? I mean, I know what it means in general, but what do you mean by it? Hold on. Got a spam call right there in the middle of a live stream. Isn't it nice? Robocalls never end. They never end. Anyway, so Trump is basically using his pressure, from the American government side to tell Israel, let these guys go. I really fail to see on what ground. I've explained it before. The Hamas was supposed to release every single one of the not just living hostages, but also the dead hostages within 72 hours. And they said there might be a few bodies, like 3 or 4, a very small number. They didn't specify, but a few, they said, right? A small number of bodies that they might have a hard time getting to or finding or whatever, which is, sorry, but after we've seen what they've done with the bodies of like Mr. Tarfati and other people that they've apparently, kept in freezers for the past year and a half, it is just not believable that they didn't know where every single one of them was, because, as you know, the hostages are to them more valuable than gold, since they are literally the most valuable asset that they have at the moment, right? Without those hostages, and they only have 4 left, as far as we know, they have absolutely zero leverage against Israel. Not that Israel, needs at this point to wait, in my opinion, to finish them off. But Israel, for some reason, has chosen to play this dance where they allow this international stability force thing to kind of take shape, even before it deploys, and having these discussions back and forth on whether or not Qatar and Turkey can participate. They should absolutely not be allowed to participate with boots on the ground in any capacity, not in Israel and not in Gaza. They have no business being there. Yes, Israel and Turkey do a lot of military exercises together over the years. Hello there. Gilad Zamuri, okay. Don't free the vat. Yeah, no, I think they absolutely should not. Jeff, I agree with you. They should not free them. They should. This is a war. If they don't want to surrender, the obvious other solution to them, the obvious other resolution to this issue is they will be eliminated. But, if you know Israel, you know what they very well might do. They'll either let them walk or, or accept their arrest, arrest them basically. But it is absolutely crazy and chaotic. Galit Zamori, okay. It is an absolutely horrible situation. And hopefully the pressure will end, because it's very damaging overall to the situation of the realpolitik happening right now. This is the U.S. basically saying to Israel, hey, you can't do the thing that every single army in the world does, when it traps its enemy in a compromising situation, right? Like, name me an army on the planet that wouldn't immediately eliminate these guys. There isn't one, right? Now, of course, if they surrender, sure, they surrender. No need to harm them, put them in prison. But personally, let's be frank, these guys, if they're held in prison, they're just going to be 200 people, 200 more terrorists that Israel is very likely going to have to release at some point in the future, unless we actually get rid of the problem, which is, yes, it's Hamas, but it's also more than Hamas, right? Because obviously, if the problem was just Hamas, the problem would exist by now, right? The problem is that there's far too many people who actually support Hamas and Palestinian Islamic Jihad and all the other terrorist groups in Gaza to actually be able to be sure that there can be a future towards peace in the next year or so. And we're very likely looking at a situation where there isn't going to be any kind of progress towards peace in the next year or so, because we're talking about multiple generations of people who have been successively brainwashed from practically birth, right? From the time they can understand words, to hate Jews and hate Israel. And from the earliest possible age, they're literally taught nursery rhymes about killing Jews and killing Israelis. Right? It's absolutely disgusting what they do. And for that reason, I don't believe that Israel needs to be playing footsie and being nice with 200 armed Islamic jihadis who just want to destroy and kill. And they're trapped. So they're in a bad situation. There are rumors that some of them have starved to death. I personally don't believe it. But, maybe they have. But if they were in the tunnels, somebody said, I read some reports, some credible reports, from, I believe it was, trying to think which story it was. Oh, I think it was actually a reporter on TBN who reported that he had credible information saying basically they've been in there since March or so, which is a fairly long time to be in those tunnels, right? But they're obviously well provisioned for to be in those places for that long. And there's 200 of them. That means we're talking about a pretty massive part of the network where they obviously had a lot of provisions and all the infrastructure that they needed to be living there for 7 months underground. But does that mean that they're in great shape right now? Well, no. For all we know, they were supposed to, get skedaddle out of there by now. But within the last few weeks. But we don't know. We don't know when their provisions ran out, if they did at all. Also, I don't know. It seems a bit dubious to me that they've been in there for that long. But it came in from a fairly credible reporter, an Israeli guy named Yair Pinto, who does a lot of good reporting for TBN or whatever here in Israel. And, he's just a news presenter, basically, does analysis too. And he knows the situation on the ground fairly well. And it's a reminder of just how crazy the situation is, really. Right? Like, if they've been there since March and they knew they could come out and do something this whole time, but they stayed for some reason, then they'd have plenty of opportunity to have done attacks if they felt that they had the ability to do so. And we have 200 of them all at once in one place. That is not an insignificant amount of people with guns and other weapons. They could certainly do a fair amount of damage, right? But at the same time, the believability on how many actual people they have there, right? The claim of 150 or 200 is a little hard to believe when you think about how many provisions you need to stock in tunnels for that long. It doesn't mean that it couldn't have happened, and very well maybe that they have been in there since March, but probably not. It's on video in Israeli elementary schools. Yeah, absolutely. What's on video in elementary schools? What are you talking about? Won't they just dig their way out? No, they can't just dig their way out. Israel has sensors and Israel has soldiers around. I mean, sure, I guess if they were the super quietest people on the planet, but no, they're probably not likely to dig their way out. And also, it would take them a while to dig their way out. And by the time they do, this problem will likely be resolved one way or the other because the Israeli government is likely to take some kind of action. Who knows? Maybe this week, right? Um, it would take a while to dig out of such a massive hole that they're in, and it would probably be very difficult for them to escape unnoticed, considering how, like, if they don't have digging tools down there, right? If they don't actually have the right tools necessary to do the dig, then they probably can't just get out of there very easily. So it wouldn't be feasible. And also, if they did try to get out and they were noticed, Israel would absolutely blast them all away because why would we allow them to escape? Right? If we're going to allow them to walk, we're going to allow them to walk. But if we see them trying to escape, probably not a good idea. Because if you're an IDF soldier and you see terrorists coming out of a hole, you're going to blast them away because that's your duty, right? If you have no reason to suspect that they have posed any threat to hostages, because the hostages are all, the living ones are all out, and there are only 3 left or 4 left that are all dead, and the only threat that they can possibly pose to, or pose any threat to, the only people they can pose any threat to are the actual soldiers themselves, and of course people in Gaza that we know they have a tendency to kill. Right, the Palestinian Hamas people have a tendency to kill Gazans. We saw that literally from the moment that there was a peace, or not a peace, a ceasefire signed, and Hamas went around Gaza and has been, killing opponents left and right, hundreds of them, right, since the last 3.5 weeks. It's on video. Why don't they dig their way? Okay, have a nice day, Mister. I don't know what you mean by zog washed, but okay. Crips versus. I mean, you think I'm zog? I don't know what it means. Zog washed. Does it mean that I like the zog or I don't like the zog, or that I think the zog is real or I think the zog is fake? What does that mean? You know the name. You know the same is true of Israeli children, buddy. What are you talking about? Yeah, yeah. If they don't surrender, it really should be the end of their days, in my opinion. I mean, look, if there were Israeli soldiers trapped in a tunnel right now, and the Hamas had the ability to kill them or allow them to surrender, and the Israelis chose not to surrender, what do you think Hamas would do? Like, if the IDF had no way of really escaping, right? Just imagine a situation where there's like a couple hundred IDF soldiers trapped inside of a tunnel, and the Hamas have rigged the entries and exits with bombs, and if anything Israel tries to do to save them, the bombs will just go off and kill them all. And the IDF soldiers have 2 options: surrender or be killed. You think the Americans would be pressuring the Hamas to release them? I say that as somebody who is someone who gives a lot of credit to the Trump administration for pressuring Hamas to actually release hostages over the past 9 months. But we're talking about 200 armed combatants. You think America would actually pressure Hamas to say, oh no, let the Israeli soldiers go free? Or do you think they would tell Israel, get your act together and get your own guys out of there if you can? That's probably what they'd be saying, right? They'd probably be saying, like, well, send in a bunch of troops and fight it out, or whatever, right? They wouldn't be lobbying for the side whose soldiers are trapped to be allowed to go free. Not so much. I mean, maybe Trump would, okay, but as seen by this very situation, probably not. And as much as he's been a friend to Israel, and I've always said he's been a friend to Israel so far in his presidential campaigns and elections and administrations, But I've also always said that if the opportunity ever presented itself for him to do something that goes against Israel's interest, that he would probably also do that, just because of the nature of his transactional characteristics. I don't think he's ever going to like actually stab Israel in the back in a way that would actually harm the security of the country of Israel. I don't think he would ever do that, because I think he is an ally of Israel. But being an ally of Israel doesn't necessarily mean that you're always going to do everything that's, that the Israeli government has as its interest, because the Israeli government itself does things that are counter to the interests of its own people, just like any government does, right? There are many people who disagree with the actions of the Israeli government right here in Israel. You might support the government fully, or you might support them partially, or you might not support them at all, and you might even be completely against them or partially against them. Right? A government is a government. So I don't blame Trump for like backstabbing Israel in some kind of a way with this pressure, but it is pressure that is counter to the interests of the current Israeli government, which wants to have closure on this issue and wants to have these terrorists be arrested if possible, if they surrender. But if they don't surrender, they're combatants in a battlefield. Why should they not meet their fate like every other combatant in a battlefield who is on the losing side of a kinetic fight? You know, why should they not suffer the same consequences as so many other soldiers? And again, I don't want anybody to die. I would rather that they surrender on some level. But at the same time, I realize that if Israel does take them in as captives, there's a very high probability that these people will be used again in some kind of a prisoner exchange. So yeah, I want people to live. I don't want anybody to die. But Hamas terrorists who are armed and in the field of battle are operating as combatants. They're irregular combatants. They don't follow the normal rules of war. They don't follow the Geneva Conventions. They don't operate in uniform. You can see the videos of them that have been published since this has come out, and there are videos of them in the tunnel. None of them are wearing uniforms. None of them. But they've all got guns, and they've all been seen with supplies. So we know they have a bunch of supplies in those tunnels, and we know there's a lot of them. There's more of them than you can see on the camera. Right? Those tunnels are not exactly very wide in the particular places where they are, at least where they shot the videos. For all we know, there's some big rooms in some places along the way in those tunnels. We know that there are many tunnels there that are literally wide enough to drive trucks through. So we don't know what part. I mean, unless you're in the IDF unit that actually is in charge of knowing how those tunnels are spaced out and shaped, etc., which they do with various detection means, or unless you're in those tunnels themselves, about those specific tunnels, nobody knows, right? It's a very, very, very small number of people that actually know what situation they're in. But we know their situation is not a winning one. So the thing is, if they're allowed to walk free, is that a win for Hamas? And does it actually help create more stability in Gaza and reduce tensions between Hamas and Israel? My argument is no, it doesn't reduce any tensions at all whatsoever. Because obviously Hamas leadership does not care about these people, or they would tell them to surrender. Why would they tell them don't surrender no matter what? The only reason they would do that is because they either don't care about them, or they know something that's not being said in public, which is very likely. They know something about the negotiations, which is not being said in public. Right? They're being pressured to do one thing or the other, or they're trying to apply pressure through their biggest supporters like Qatar, Turkey, Iran, but Qatar and Turkey in particular, because they're signatories to this deal. So they're doing everything they can to put pressure on those supporters, the supportive governments, to pressure the American government and the Israelis to basically free these guys. And by these guys, I mean terrorists, many of whom probably have blood on their hands, right? Anyway, that's going to be a wrap for now. I'm going to wish you all a wonderful and pleasant day. I hope you have a wonderful evening, day, night, morning, whatever time it is, wherever you are. And hopefully, I'll see you in the next video. Until then, be sure to like and subscribe and comment and hit the bell. I really actually want to know what you think about this situation. So if you could, please write a comment below. That'd actually be great. Like, what's your opinion? I'll be happy to see what you guys think in the comments after this video is posted. Go ahead and write your comments below, and let's open up a discussion about what is the thing that Israel should actually do. Should Israel release these guys, or should Israel eliminate these guys, or should Israel do everything it can to just arrest these guys, even if it means they might have to risk injury or death on the Israeli side just to capture these guys? Because if they refuse to surrender, it's going to have to be a fight. I'd love to know what you think. You know what I think. I think it should be game over for these guys. And I don't wish death upon anybody, but they're literally asking for it. So, I hope this can be resolved in the best way possible. But I'd love to know what you guys think. So, till next time, take care. Peace. Shalom.